Scene one, Apple, take one.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Film Notes. I'm Shane Borza, a filmmaker and host, and this is the show where I sit down and talk with people in the industry about the industry and get their notes on who they are and what they do. I'm really excited to have my good friend Jackson Benjamin here today, who we have worked together in QC and post-production, but he's also done a lot of other things in the industry, including working with and for unions. And because there was just a big strike last year, I thought it would be a great time for him to come in and talk to us a little bit about what unions do, as well as where he is working on the lots and in and with studios. So Jackson, welcome to the call. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
So I just mentioned a whole bunch of different roles that you've had like over the years in the industry. So talk to me a little bit about how you got started. Is this a lifelong passion, like you grew up loving movies and wanting to work in the industry? Did you stumble into it? And also, how did you kind of go from where we met doing QC to where you are now?
It's interesting, and I think I kind of fell into the same path as a lot of people who went to film school. So I went to film school at Cal State Fullerton. In school, I was focusing mostly on screenwriting. I had, aspirations to be a writer director. I really enjoyed editing. I left school thinking I'm just going to be a full-time creative, and this is going to be it. And as life goes, I kind of found my way into different paths. When I left Cal State Fullerton, I started in just like an editorial room for Undercover Boss, which was kind of interesting. I was doing logging, which was really more so transcribing verbatim every episode of that show. And I suddenly realized that the kind of glitz and glamour of how I thought post-production was, and what it was going to look like was very different. And I'm working nights. I'm driving from Chino Hills to Culver City every night and just pulling tapes and typing out the dailies. So it was interesting, but I started questioning, is this a path that I'm willing to invest into and this and that. And then oddly enough, I met somebody who used to be at Deluxe. She's now, I believe, with IMAX, through a friend at a bar. It's kind of one of those things, and it's this industry and maybe every industry. It's who you know, right? And you make those connections in your network. But she said, "Oh, we've got a position up at Deluxe," and I'm like, "What the hell is Deluxe? What is a Deluxe? Like I don't know what is distribution. So it was really, really a strange and new thing to me. I applied as a keys manager, KDM creation and distribution, and didn't get that job. About 2 weeks later, I get a call from Sean Romano, and he said, "Would you be interested in being in the vault?" And I was like, "Maybe." So it just kind of took this just strange and it took me on a strange and interesting journey. And that's how I found my way into QC. It was I was working kind of a mid shift. I started late morning. It was 11 to 8. It was a perfect shift. It was just like sleep in, but you're not home too late. You can still do things. And I bumped into a QC operator. I couldn't tell you who it was at the time, but I bumped into somebody in the client kitchen, and they were talking about what they were doing, what they were watching, and I thought, you could get paid to watch movies? Like, yeah, I was a kid, that was, I did that anyway, did that in my free time. So if I can get paid to do what I like to do in my free time, that's kind of a win-win. I trained unofficially with various operators after my shift. I worked till about 10 o'clock. I'd clock out and I'd do it on my own time. And I learned about, what to look for, what, issues you could run into at that point in the post process, because when you get to distribution, editorial is locked, pictures locked, audio's, the mix is finished. Really you're looking for anomalies that can occur in the compression of this small digital file that's going out into the world, with film reels, there was still the QC process, but they're watching obviously the physical reel by reel in the labs. Whereas we have this, I say small, but it's, hundreds of gigs. We have this, digital file that we have to make sure the integrity of it is as good as it can be for viewers around the world. So I learned new kind of techie things at that point too that I had never been exposed to in school. So it was a very cool and exciting journey. And then the projection systems, that whole aspect of it, I thought was really awesome, a cool skill set that not a lot of people can say that they've done.
So many things changed over that like decade, where we went from digital cinema being a unique, different thing to then everything being exclusively digital and pretty much sending things worldwide in the cloud.
Yeah.
So talk to me about what changed for you, because you mentioned being in different roles, being in the vault and then going to QC, but also how all that technology changed over the course of your career there.
It's interesting because, and kind of going back to what you were mentioning about digital cinema and kind of its growth, when I started in the vault in 2010, digital cinema was only 30% of the industry. Film was still king. And in, I think, 3 years, it had grown from 30 to 75. And by the time I was in QC, pretty much 100%, I mean, we'll say 95% of projection was digital. Every theater had a film backup. That's huge exponential growth in a really short period of time. It was interesting to see, the growth of 2K into 4K into high frame rates. It's I think one really great thing about the digital industry is that innovation happens faster. Maybe that's a double-edged sword. Innovation happens quicker, but then you're constantly updating standard operating procedures. You run into these things where you, like with the high frame rate, for instance, I don't know if you remember this, we kept running into those pixelation clusters where it wasn't just like a dead pixel. All of a sudden you just have this noise, on the screen. And I remember the title. I'm not going to say it just because I don't really know if we should still to this day. But, I remember the specific title and just everybody being at a total loss. And you've got engineers in there. We've got QC. We've got mastering and operations management. And everybody's pulling their hair out because they're just like, what's going on? Why can't we figure this out? The subtitles for 3D, which you also probably remember the nightmare of that. And I don't remember if it was a deluxe proprietary software or if it was, I honestly don't remember, but I do remember how much of a game changer it was when they realized that they could place the subs in real time in a room with the client to avoid all the embedding. I remember doing a QC, it was Terminator Genesis, and we spent 5 or 6 hours on a Saturday afternoon noting every single instance of an embedded sub. So the note that we had received from the account teams was, well, note only the severe instances. Well, lucky us, every single instance was severe, and it was at least every other sub. And this 2 hour and 15-minute movie, whatever it was, suddenly was 6 hours long because we were just constantly writing all these things down. So just a simple idea that somebody took to create this software that could say, okay, we can watch this movie in real time. It'll take us a few hours, but now every subsequent QC down the line should not, in theory, I mean, obviously you have variations with language and characters and things that may fall into different areas in space in the screen where you might have a minor embed, but those days of full lines of dialogue sinking into the picture were no more. I mean, that's huge. So your productivity goes up, your quality goes up, more clients want to use you. It's just like, it's a snowball effect. And that's something that is, I think, unique about the digital cinema process versus old film processing. That and just being able to fix things so much easier. I was talking to a friend's dad yesterday, actually, who was a colorist for many years, and he worked at Photochem for, gosh, I don't know, I think he said about 25 years or so. But he was a film colorist, and he worked with a lot of big directors and like just talk about that kind of, like the pressure, right, of doing color correction on physical 35 millimeter. He said he had to do 16 millimeter for a long time, and before they could say deem him, knight him, you are ready for the 35. Like it was just like, because you make a mistake, that print is done. It's over. So uh, there's just so much room for growth and innovation and creativity, and for error. There's just so much room for error now. So we can really hone in, and nothing's ever perfect. When you consider everything that has to fall into place from pre-production to production, which is a whole other beast that I am not as familiar with, but everything that can go wrong on a set, and then taking that into editorial and the rest of post. It's never going to be perfect, but at least in the digital world, you can get very close to it.
I'm glad that you not only talked about some of those logistic like nightmares, so to speak, because I do remember, people would be like, why isn't my QC flipped to complete? And you're like, well, because there's a problem, and this 2-hour QC is now going to take the weekends because we had to call engineering in, there's nobody here, or there's all these issues that nobody knew of.
Right.
And in the short term, it's a nightmare, but in the long term, like you mentioned, we're kind of learning on the fly and adjusting. And that was one of the pivotal moments in my career where I said, oh, this is starting to get really complicated. And they asked me to lead a team, and then that put me on the fast track to like management. And I was like, okay, I'm really glad I'm not in the room anymore, because like you said at the beginning, this was when the first Sony Spider-Man came out. I remember I was like, oh, I got paid to watch Spider-Man like 100 times.
Right. And it never gets old.
And I remember telling people, like, they're like, you moved to LA, you're working in the industry, what's your job? I was like, my job is to drink coffee and watch movies. That's my job. They're all like, this is the greatest job in the world. I'm like, it is, and it was, until it got so complicated and there were so many systems that I started like dropping the ball. I was like, I can juggle 5 things, I can't juggle 25 things.
Right.
So that was really helpful for me to have that option. Now you stayed with it much longer, and this is where I want to get into union stuff, because I still credit you as being the person who kind of brought the union in, and that began your kind of relationship with them, and it also then led you to other things, kind of both through the union and with the union. So talk to me a little bit about what might be a parallel for you, where I was like QC to management and you went like QC to union.
Organizing the union at Deluxe was, honestly, it really changed, I think, my path, my career path, my outlook on the corporate world, it's hard. Honestly, it's really hard to articulate, because I think there was very much a snowball effect to what happened to, like, the repercussions, the cause and effect of organizing within a workplace, seeing the fruits of that labor, but then also on the flip side, seeing some of the negative repercussions. And I think that, and I'll jump back. I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but I'll jump back to your question. But now that I've been in a position where I have been the technician, I've been the union rep, and I've been management, and I can see different perspectives now that I wasn't, not that I wasn't privy to at the time, but that I just hadn't had the experience, specifically at the time of organizing with Deluxe, kind of going back to our comment about we're getting paid to watch movies. It's like, yes, but then also getting back into the complications of it, the stress, the accountability factor. If you miss something and it gets through, internally, if you miss something, you're watching on your own, gets past the client, it gets into the field, that mistake could cost the company tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. When I was in the vault, I saw a guy have to pack up his desk and leave because he got fired on the spot. This was pre-union, so that probably wouldn't have happened when we were. But he was fired on the spot because he put the wrong logo at the head of a movie, and he wasn't inherently wrong because it was the right logo, but it was for the wrong version. So it was a weird distribution where one studio took domestic and the other studio took international, and he just simple human error, but that movie went out into the world and it cost the company in a matter of 24 hours hundreds of thousands of dollars. Lost, cannot recover that, and he was out, and so I found myself in this position of QC where you you have to get it right, and that's a lot of pressure. And at the time, they weren't paying much for the position. So it was kind of like, well, wait a minute, you want me to be a projectionist, and so you have to know all, right? You have to know all the equipment, and you have to be able to run that efficiently because you're not always going to have an engineer there to help you. And then you also have to be the QCer, and you have to watch things, listen to things, get everything right, make sure it's good as it was intended. You have to run rooms successfully, these sessions for high profile A-list directors, and sometimes talent and post supervisors and editors. Like, you got studio executives, you got these important people coming in, and you have to know your stuff. Because if they ask a question, again, it's you're in there. The account managers aren't in there. And I just suddenly realized that the pay, the reflection of that to, and honestly, just the way we were treated in general, because people just said, well, what? You just watch movies. You sit there in a screen room all day. Lucky you. We don't have to pay you anything for it, And that's when conversations began. We realized, other QCers in the industry, most were studios, but they were getting a lot more, which I understand at the studio level, that's fine. But there was like a, $40 to $50 an hour gap between what our lowest paid QC operators were making at Deluxe versus some of these studio operators. And we realized that there needed to be something done about that. So we started talking about our wages. And honestly, that was the first thing, was people just started having conversations about, hey, what do you make? Like, I just kind of need to know, because I feel like I've heard things. I don't know if this is true, but as soon as those convos started rolling, we found that there was like a $10 to $12 gap between the lowest paid QC operator to the highest. And then we were like, well, this is bullshit. Like, you can't do this. We're all doing the same job, So, and some of it wasn't always seniority. Sometimes there was, generally the higher paid operators were around longer, but that's still, it just seemed shady. So anyway, that was kind of that pivotal moment when we realized, okay, we're never going to get anywhere on our own, and we need to come together. So we started talking to unions. We've reached out, and we learned about the healthcare systems, which, I mean, for myself, as you know, I've had a lot of surgeries over the past decade that I wouldn't have been able to have without the insurance that we have. And so, we realized that there was a lot to gain from joining the union at the time. So, as you know, obviously we were successful, and it was what a lot of people said was unprecedented, because Deluxe has been known in the past to be very union busting. I mean, they've gone in and purchased companies that were union prior, laid everybody off, and then hired people in not union. And so I thought I had maybe it was naive, but I had a very kind of green and naive perspective of what would happen once we were done. Because I thought, hey, as long as we can vote yes and we can ratify a contract, they can't touch me. They can't retaliate. And what I quickly found, and I never obviously had proof of this, but what I quickly found was that they blacklisted me, or at least I'm pretty sure that they did, because I, for years, applied for jobs. Basically, I said, look, I'm going to invest into my pension because you had to work so many years or so many days, whatever it is, to get your pension. So I knew I just need to at least get to that spot. The pay increase was huge. I mean, our first year, we got a 20% increase in wages. And anybody that was above scale got a 5% increase. And that was good. I mean, that was, not everyone was happy. You're not going to please everybody. But you have to do what's best for the majority of the group. And that's kind of where you have to focus in on things with the union, you know. And you have to make sacrifices. And this kind of goes into a little bit about like the recent negotiations and strikes. You know, I'm not privy to it, so I don't know all the ins and outs. But one thing that I do know is neither side can be too proud or know everything, and both sides have to be willing to compromise. And when we were in negotiations, one of the reps said something that always stuck with me. And as soon as each party leaves the room feeling like they lost something, you've reached an agreement. But both parties always choose to stand their ground to win everything. And sometimes that's a good perspective to take and leverage, and you try your best. But I think what I've taken the most out of it is that you can't have it all, and that's life. That's going to happen whether you're in a union or not. But you should always ask and maybe demand what's fair. And you should be willing to bend when you know that you're asking for too much. And I felt, and I have a very unpopular opinion of the recent strikes, is based on some of the things that I read, I felt like it seemed like the unions weren't bending on things that maybe they could have sooner to get people back to work. Because what I was seeing, especially with the SAG strike, was friends getting laid off because of that strike. Because all of these post companies were going, we're going to run out of work, and we got to do something now. And so just started cutting people. And I don't think that, and that stuff wasn't on TV. That wasn't in social media. You know, it wasn't, that's not the cool side of seeing the celebrities striking outside the studios and picketing. It was collateral damage. Nobody's talking about it. The locals, sorry, I'm kind of going into this other tangent of my irritations with the union, but the locals of the people getting laid off as collateral damage were doing nothing to help their members, but we're posting on social media. We stand by SAG, we stand by the Writers Guild, we stand by the Directors Guild. And as their members are losing work and signing up for unemployment and trying to negotiate severance packages, and that left a bad taste in my mouth, because once we were ratified at Deluxe, the company tricked me into a temporary 5-day work week. I was previously, as you remember, working 4 days a week. Pre-contract, when I was making about $4 less an hour, I was making more money each month. My monthly income was more than the next 3 consecutive years. So it took me a full 3 years to catch up to my salary that I was making pre-contract. But the loophole was, for the company, was, well, it was overtime. But that's your schedule and it's built in. The contract states the employer can't do anything to worsen your conditions. But for whatever reason, they didn't view my loss in wages as worsening of conditions. And so the union told me, sorry, they can do that. And so suddenly I found myself in this weird, is juxtaposition the right term? But I just found myself in this kind of weird space of like, what is this new reality? And I'm really grateful that I've helped so many people, but I screwed myself in the process. And so I started looking for work. And I found myself in a space where I went, oh my God, I don't have a lot of experience. I have a very unique niche experience. I can project digital cinema. I can QC digital cinema. I know a lot about audio and picture and all these things, but in that realm, but I don't have managerial experience. I don't have project management experience. I don't have set experience. I have some union experience, but I couldn't find anything, and nobody was willing to put in the risk. And I truly believe that it was that Deluxe had blacklisted me. I'd get initial interviews. I'd go to second rounds of interviews, and then I'd get ghosted. And I'd reach out. Oh, sorry, we went a different direction. It was very weird. It was just like hot and then very cold. And the only thing I could think of was, did so well up until that point. Did they call and ask about me? Am I now looked at? And it could have all been in my head. I don't know. But I just had this sudden realization of, am I viewed as a troublemaker? Simply because all I really wanted to do was help my friends and myself and be treated fairly, get proper breaks, not having to work through lunch every day.
I think when people outside the industry, like you said about the recent strikes, they see the celebrities or they see the picketing or what have you, they don't understand how wide and deep the industry is.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, especially, you talked about indie filmmaking and how like digital is so much easier. And when I kind of mentor people a lot, one of the things, I have to talk about like, okay, so you shot everything, great.
Yep.
Now you have this Herculean task of the 1,000 post-production things to do, and they'll, it's crickets. Like they look at me deer in headlights. They don't know that there's all these things to do to get something done and up and out.
Mm-hmm.
And those, whether it's New York or Atlanta or LA, those kind of industry hubs or cities are full of people who do all that behind the scenes background stuff.
Yep.
And so it makes it this big global industry on one hand, and this very small network of, like you said at the beginning, who So it's very easy to have someone say something about somebody, and all of a sudden, now there's a problem.
Yeah.
Or we don't know what happened, but something happened.
Yes.
And that can be kind of top down, like someone just decides like, we're not going to renew the contract with this company. Or it could be kind of bottom up where someone's like, well, I don't like so-and-so. So no matter where I go, whatever I do, if anyone ever talks to me about so-and-so, like, I don't like them, so I'm going to throw them under the bus. And either way, you have this huge ripple effect. So whether it's union versus union or union supporting union or studio versus union or someone trying to change jobs, there's this through line kind of through all that. But you were able, after some kind of murkiness, to move into working for studio stuff. So let's talk about where you went and then where you are now.
The kind of the connector in that was a 4-month stint at the Cinematographers Guild. When I was at Deluxe, there was a temporary organizer at Local 600 that they were looking for, and they had never had a organizer in their local previously because the business reps kind of handled that. So every rep had their own show and production that they worked on, commercials. Some of them focused on commercials and whatnot. And then, but each business rep on their own, as they got to know different members, would just receive calls where they'd say, hey, I'm on this set. It's non-union. Half of the crew here we want to flip it. And so then the business rep would go in and help out with that. But so they were trying to kind of test the waters and see, do we want to hire a full-time organizer to kind of assist the reps in that sense, but so that they could focus on and maybe create a procedure on how we go about doing this, because it just kind of became too overwhelming. And I was very excited about the idea of organizing because it was a really exciting time for me. I it was stressful. Like I think I mentioned to you the other day because I had forgotten that I wasn't there when the whole crew walked out and picketed in front of the building. I was at home with shingles, and at that time, I guess I was like my early 30s. Like it's very young to be getting shingles, you know what I mean? But it was all the stress of everything, and trying to get a fair contract that I found myself at home, and they're all out there posting on Facebook and fighting the man, and I'm at home in bed, uh, with like a disease that people don't usually run into until they're mid 60s. So it was just kind of a, oh my gosh, this is big, kind of a big moment of realization. But so anyway, I thought this could be cool. Maybe this is my calling. Maybe it's not the craft so much. Maybe I want to just help people. So I took an offer. I said, if you can guarantee me 6 months, I'll leave. I mean, I knew I was going to have the same benefits because it's also union and it's similar, in that sense, it was a lateral move. But it was really hard to leave a place that I left a month before I hit 11 years with Deluxe. And that was kind of a sad moment. It was the world I knew for so long. I went through so many changes in life, and in that place, and I created a family. Um, and but I felt like I just needed to do something, make a jump and a leap, and it would lead to other things. I just felt very strongly about that. And so I did, and they didn't try to keep me. I didn't think they would. I tried to negotiate. I said, well, hey, I'm happy to stay in this lead position if you'll match this, and they just said, nope, we wish you the best of luck. You know, See ya. And, okay, that's cool. So anyway, uh, so I went to Local 600 and I learned more about contracts. I learned kind of more in depth on how to read the various collective bargaining agreements. And one thing that I wasn't used to is because Deluxe had a very specific standalone agreement, that isn't affected by the majors agreements or anything like that. But going into Local 600, I found that I was reading the basic agreement, which kind of covers all major productions, the majors agreement, which basically covers all studio work specifically. And it's a weird one because there's people who work full time. Like for instance, when I found myself at Paramount, I was working full time under the majors agreement, but crew members on set working temporary also are covered under that same agreement. So you're kind of finding yourself having to learn what's covered by what, who's under what. Each production is under a different thing. And so I'm reading maybe like 5 different contracts on a daily basis, trying to understand this. I also found myself doing some work as a business rep, taking calls, one person a week. I mean, I'm sorry, each person took 1 day a week to field calls from members. So I had to learn a lot about what someone's rights were, and it's also a very difficult conversation to have with somebody who's very upset about, an AD or someone on set who's giving them a hard time. And you have to tell them you have no protection under the contract for this, because then they're just pissed at you, you know, they're just like, what good are you, and you do feel kind of helpless in that sense. But I I learned a lot. I definitely learned a lot. I also saw some of the flaws, and this isn't speaking anything ill against the Cinematographers Guild, but just in general within IATSE, in unions inherently, that there are a lot of flaws. Like, for instance, under one of the agreements, each member is only allotted 3 sick days a year. Technically, it says 6, but you can't use more than 3. Why that makes any sense, I don't know. You should just say it's 3. The idea is that you're banking it for the following year. And for somebody who's working on a freelance basis, project to project, fine. because most likely they're not going to get sick in the 3 months that they're going to be on set. And if they are, they're probably only going to need a few days, right? But when you have someone who's working 40 hours a week at a studio on the lot, and they only get 3 sick days, but they're putting in, 52 weeks a year, working 40 hours a week, you could get a winter cold in January, and you're screwed for the rest of the year, unless you could take it unpaid or you could use vacation. Now, why would you have a single agreement covering two very different types of employees or members, right? Like, one size does not fit all. But so as I'm kind of in the system now here, a different system, but another, I'm in the system, I'm suddenly just seeing all the pitfalls of it and feeling very overwhelmed about the fact that I can do nothing to change this. Like, I just was like, no, like, I can't do this. This is crazy. Everybody hates you. Nobody's happy. And, you're working a lot of hours. I mean, there was countless weekends that I had to sit on Zooms with the full board of the union, which are all made up of members, right? The executive board. Most of them are voted in. I believe maybe all of them are voted into this position, and they all represent different aspects of membership. But it'd go on the whole weekend. It wasn't even just like Saturday. You'd spend 8 hours on Saturday, 8 hours on Sunday, listening to people argue. And I just said, I'm not ready for this, and it was also in a union that I didn't even understand the craft. I don't know cameras, I don't know. I mean, I guess there were certain things that I kind of had a general understanding of because of, just learning from friends and school and whatnot. But I just thought, how am I supposed to rep these people that don't really speak their language either? So, knowing that it was temporary and realizing that I wanted to do maybe something more creative, but not really sure where I was going to find myself, I stumbled across a opening at Paramount.
Hey everyone, sorry to stop the show, but we have to pay some bills around here. And to do that, I wanted to point out a couple things I have on offer at my site, shaneborza.com. If you scroll down to my courses, you can see I have both a content creator live class and a DIY version. These teach you everything you need to know from a production standpoint so you can either get a writing project done, an audio project, or a film project. Doesn't matter, it works for everyone. If you scroll down, you can see some of my clients and some of the testimonials people have left telling you how helpful this has been for them. So I hope you check that out. You can also go to my shop and you can see all that I have on offer, to include coaching programs, audio stuff like soundtracks, film production stuff. I have filmmaker bundles, all types of things you might need to help you get your art out into the world. As you can see, I also have a number of books. They are all on Apple Books. So you can go to my site and get them directly, or you can go to Apple Books, put my name in, and then you can see all the books there. They are easily downloadable and you can read them on an iPad or something like that. There are coaching books here. There are poetry and photo books here. And I'm very excited. I just updated my Film Notes workbook and Film Notes book. They are expanded and updated 2023 editions. So please check those out if you want some extra stuff to help teach you production. And now back to the show.
The title was Senior Media Archivist, but really it was project management. And I learned that the only reason they used a union classification was because it's faster to hire union employees. I was the only union member in my department, essentially doing the same job as everybody else in my department. So it was kind of a weird thing. It was one of those jobs where you're kind of expected to work outside your normal business hours, but as a union member, you also have to get approval for overtime. So I was in this kind of weird limbo of how much work am I willing to do for free? Because it was just kind of weird. I had to ask for approval prior, but it's like, how do you know if you're going to need overtime? That was always our argument too in QC. It was like, well, you don't always know that you're going to need to spend an extra 2 hours on this project, right? So that was essentially how I found my way at Paramount. And also, again, a friend knew one of the hiring managers, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, let me reach out." And again, there you go. It's one of those things where it helps you get a leg up, you know? And it's one thing that I learned early on at Deluxe was because I know I'm someone, and you probably experienced this as my previous manager, is I get very passionate. I'm also someone who cares about fairness, and sometimes it gets me into trouble. I have high expectations of others, which is really unrealistic because you can't control other people. But I expect people to follow the rules. I expect people to do their end, their part. I expect someone to, if they're going to ask me to do a job, give me explicit directions. Don't leave me hanging, right? But I realized, and maybe it took me longer than it should have, but I realized that I had to find that gentle balance of know your job, be good at your job, be assertive, don't take bullshit, but also be really nice to people and smile and don't, I don't know, don't speak out of line. Like don't treat people, don't get so angry that you're treating people with disrespect, even if it's unintentional. You know what I mean? And I think that I did that a lot in my early years in my career. Was like, I was just very hard nosed about things. I mean, even in the vault, I was working with a guy who went on to become a project manager, and he was so loosey goosey. He was like, "Yeah, you don't need to create a shipping form. I'll just send it out. No big deal. I'll take care of it. Have a good lunch." You know what I mean? I'm like, "Where's the paper? Where's the form? You must sign it out. You must tell me where it's going." And it was just like, hell no, I'm not sending that out. I'm not sending it out until you send, you know what I mean? So I mean, definitely didn't want to be him or his, I didn't want to do things the way he did it. But I also realized that I was a bit of a soup Nazi. I was just like, no soup, please, get out of here. Let's send in the next one. So I needed to learn how to.
Let me jump in on this because
Yeah.
this is, I think, a good segue to where I like to go after we get the story and the background and everything.
Because then
And
I'll get into the Paramount
before
part.
before we do any wrap up is getting those, hence the name of the show, those film notes.
Yeah.
He's saying, you're in like your second decade in the industry now. You, as you mentioned earlier, have gone from outside the union to inside the union to now management. You have those different perspectives. So when you look back on all this, and this is what I think you were starting to get into, is the lessons learned. Like, what are the most valuable notes that you would give to people from the experience and wisdom you've accrued over these different roles?
One thing that was interesting at Paramount was being on the project management side of things. And specifically what I was working on were acquisition titles, things that weren't going to be released theatrically, but feature films that we were acquiring that were going straight to home media, what people refer to as OTT, which is over the top. And essentially that just implies you're surpassing theatrical, and it's a fancy term for home video now, because home, or a movie of the week, home video, that kind of thing obviously used to be kind of a taboo, lesser than term. So now it's straight to home entertainment, or OTT. But what I realized in that job, because I enjoyed, a lot of my time was spent reading QC reports. And that was part of what why I was an appeal to them as a hiring team, was he knows this language. And a lot of them didn't have that background. It took them a long time to kind of get used to that. Whereas I'm reading through these and I'm like, oh, yep, and understanding it made project management fun and exciting, and felt very natural to move into. But it is inherently a 40+ hour a week job. So I found myself in a place where I went, you know what? I like this. I might kind of consider kind of trying to get into a route of post supervision or some sort of creative management in the post realm. But I have to do that outside the union, because I just found myself running into so many parameters as a full-time employee in this capacity that it didn't lend itself to me at all. And there wasn't a lot of growth. So a friend of mine who was at New Regency, I had reached out to him because he was also at, funny enough, he got the job I didn't get at Deluxe. So he got my job, my first job I applied for at Deluxe. He left and went on. I don't remember what his paths were before he got to Paramount, but he got to Paramount. I left Deluxe, Union, made my way to Paramount, see him on a Zoom call, and I was like, oh my god, what's new? What's going on? And he's like, oh my gosh. So he goes, let's meet for coffee. So we meet we meet at the Coffee Bean on the lot, and I said, how do you like Paramount? He says, it's great. I'm leaving in 2 weeks. And I was like, what? But I just got here. So, and he was going to New Regency. And he said, it just seems like a really exciting opportunity, blah, blah. And he told me a little bit about it. He leaves. I spend about a little over a year at Paramount. I hit him up. Hey, what's going on? How you been? This and that. How do you like New Regency? He said, great. I'm leaving in 2 weeks. I said, well, that's interesting. And he says, yeah, are you looking for something? And I said, I am. And he said, well, if you have time for a chat today, I'll tell you about my current gig because they're going to need to backfill it. So as he explained to me, it's a director position, so it's a department head, which is exciting. And it's managing a couple of coordinators it's for the distribution department. So it's, it is kind of my bread and butter. I know more aspects of distribution now, not only theatrical, but now home entertainment, and also the technical aspects of the files used, right, for the home entertainment purposes and broadcast purposes. And he said, so it's a managerial role, and it is dealing with the library catalog and newer releases, but that have finished their theatrical runs for New Regency that are now going into sales for worldwide distribution home entertainment. So he said, I think this would be great for you. And he said that the position needed someone who could create efficiencies in the workflow because their kind of day-to-day was much smaller years ago, but like everybody else in the digital world have seen exponential growth where they maybe only had 20 or 30 contracts a year for distribution, and now there's about 150 plus a year, and this team of two needed help. So I said, well, that sounds really exciting, because then all of a sudden I'm thinking about all these jobs that I have taken post Deluxe, and even things that I did within Deluxe. I got a lot of gratification and excitement over creating efficiencies in that position, because I'm definitely not that person who just says I'm good with the status quo. Yeah, it's a pain in the ass that we have to write 5 different documents to say the same thing, but that's standard operating procedure. I'm just going to do it. I'm never that. I've never been that person. And so when I think about, in the vault at Deluxe, here we go, day one, I said, why the hell are we writing down ins and outs of drives with important content on them on an Excel spreadsheet that was literally, we would print a grid and write it in by hand. And we'd write the drive numbers. And it was just like, this is crazy. Why aren't we scanning these in? Then there's no typos. Then there's no, why don't we have a shipper that holds people accountable for saying this is where it should go to this person? Why don't we have a paper trail? And to this day, Deluxe uses the same shipping form that I created back in, whatever year that was, 2011 or something. That was creating efficiencies. That was changing the way things were done in a more efficient manner. And I'm like, oh. And then I think about QC, and I think about the software I won't name because I still don't know if that's proprietary to them, but the software used in QC to make certain processes faster, like tech checks, where you could put in the parameters and say, I want to watch the reel breaks, I want to watch the head and tail for this many seconds. Because as you know, if you find yourself with a 3D movie and you got to wear the glasses and you got to watch the captive view, which for people who don't know what a captive view is, it's to read closed captions for the hearing impaired viewers. you've got this device in your hand, and you've got your 3D glasses on, and you've got headphones because you also need to listen to the track that's elevated dialogue for hearing impaired viewers, and you've got a audio description track for the visually impaired, so it's describing the action on screen. And you're sitting in a D-Box chair, which for people who don't know, that is a fancy device that moves along with the action on screen. So you got all this shit on. How are you supposed to type in on a keyboard and jump from real break to real break, where you could have this nice software that will run the whole thing for you, so you could just sit in that box with all these things on and let it do its thing? There was a lot of pushback by a lot of people in that department, because, and a lot of friends who pushed back on it as viewed as automation. And I viewed it as, well, no, I mean, yeah, I'm pro-union. Yeah, I'm someone who doesn't want automation to take our jobs, but I'm also pro make my life easier, work smarter, not harder. And it has nothing to do with the ill will of the man trying to take away our jobs. This is making my life easier so that I could take a break in between my QCs before that client comes in or whatever. And so I really focused in and was doing a lot of work on my own time, trying to help engineering develop that software to make things easier for us, and trying to write down some of those processes, and then I look at the union, and here I'm trying to create forms and different things for organizing. Unfortunately, I wasn't there long enough to make a huge dent, but I feel like I started to. I was starting to track the productions that tried to organize, which ones failed, which ones didn't, what happened, what were the notes on that. I was trying to kind of start pulling all those things together. And then, sorry, I'll try to wrap this up. But basically, once I, found my way to Regency, I said, oh my gosh, this is just like light bulb moment. If I look back at this very eclectic experience, I'm noticing that these are the environments that I thrive in, is where I can help improve workflow, and now I'm in a space where it's still creative, though, because I still have to, look at QC notes. I mean, not a lot of our stuff has to be QC per se, because a lot of these files have been distributed worldwide for years because they're old titles. If someone tells me there's something wrong with Fight Club, I'm like, no, there's not. You know what I mean? Like, this has been around the block. It's fine. So, but it's just one of those things. But I'm able to take all that technical knowledge and the creative, perspective of how to make our lives easier, make our lives more efficient without having to do any redundancies and this and that in our day to day. And it just kind of came full circle, and I don't know where I'm going to end up, or if this is, if I'll be doing this forever. But when I started my career, I was really focusing on committing myself to a company for a long time, hoping that they'll return that kind of thank you for the hard work, and that it would pay off. And now I'm of a perspective of, I'm here to learn, and I will continue to do that, but I'll continue to harness relationships. I won't burn bridges. I'll never enter into a space where I feel I know more than those around me, and open up myself in learning what do they know. Because now I'm looking at contracts again, which goes back into my union work, and and organizing, and so these contracts for clients, streamers worldwide, when they're licensing our titles, I'm able to actually read this kind of legal jargon that I don't have a law degree, but I've found myself in so many arenas where I have had to read and understand these contracts that I understand this language. And I'm like, wow, this is something that I wouldn't have thought. It's a skill set I never thought I'd have. And so I'm finding that the more that I open myself up to learning new things and letting the path just kind of take me, and taking that, leap of faith, that it's helping me to grow. And it's so different from where I thought I would be after college. And not to say that I don't still have aspirations to continue to be more creative, and Ricky and I have a goal this year to shoot one thing, even if it's something small. We're just going to shoot something because we collaborate a lot in our writing, um, and there's always rooms for improvement, and I think that we should always still focus on our dreams and aspirations. But I'm also learning that maybe I don't just have one singular passion, and maybe there is a rhyme or reason to all the random kind of segues that I've taken in my career. Because now I'm finding myself in a place where I'm very happy. It's very collaborative, and I am empathetic. I think that's like a big note for myself, is have empathy for the person who is the operator sitting there going through and writing all these notes down, because that's their job, and they're telling you, here's all the things that are wrong. Take it as you will. If you're okay with it, or you don't have time or money to fix it, okay, I'm just letting you know this is how it is. I have empathy towards the people who have deadlines and have budgets, and sometimes you can't go in and fix that thing last minute because you can't have a dark screen. And you can't have, like, I think a lot of people don't know, and from your time at Deluxe, is if a movie theater is dark, it's not the studio that's paying for it, but it's the lab that's paying for every empty seat, every screening that's missed until the content's there. So there's a lot of pressures on a lot of people. And I think that my biggest note in this industry is to have empathy and cultivate relationships, because you don't know when you're going to run into somebody. And not that you should be fake with people, but I think that's where the empathy comes in, is you should just understand that everybody has demands and pressures in their job. And even if it isn't the same as yours, it doesn't make theirs any less or any more important than what you're going through. And if you learn more about their perspective, it'll make you better at whatever it is that you're doing. So that's, I think, my biggest takeaway.
Well, you did a great job of encapsulating those different views, because we really did talk about those three different things. The kind of early days, getting into the industry, getting started, where we're all trying to figure out, how does this huge thing work?
Yeah.
What role do I have in it? Shifting into that kind of middle realm where it's like, oh, everything's new and different.
Yeah.
Whether it's because you weren't in the union and then you were, or because you were at Deluxe and then you weren't, or what have you. And then moving through the years and through the ranks and through the roles to find yourself in a place. And this is something that, as I always joke, I'm like, oh, I'm almost 50. And it's like, I've been saying I'm almost 50 for like 5 years. Because once I hit 35, I'm like, I'm almost 50,
Right.
But when people who are younger, whether they're teenagers or 20s or even 30s, I'm like, as a biohacker, I'm only halfway.
Yes. Yeah.
I could have, 48 more years in my career.
Right.
I'm planning on living a long time
Yeah.
and being really healthy. So it's not that we're out of time.
Right.
Sometimes it takes you till 40 or 50 or whenever to figure out what you want to do.
Yeah.
And I heard a great line years ago where they said, our youth is for excitement, but probably no experience, wisdom, knowledge. But we had that fire and the energy and and then when we get older, that kind of fire and energy starts to diminish, but we have all the wisdom, education, and experience.
Yeah.
And so it's sometimes that thing of as you're looking forward, you're like, I don't know where this goes. I don't know what's next. I don't know where I'm going to go. But then you look back and you see, oh, A brought me to B to C to D. It seems so obvious when we look back.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you were able to touch base on all those things. I think it's really valuable for people to hear those different perspectives and maybe even understand a little bit more about how these things connect or what have you.
Yeah.
So to piggyback on that, where, if anywhere, would you like people to either connect with you or any of the places you work or any of the things you work on? Are there anything that you'd like to spotlight?
I don't have a large social media presence. So I don't know that if it's someone who doesn't know me personally, they may not get a lot of satisfaction in following me personally. But anybody can always feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. They can look me up and just say that listen to the podcast or they watched the episode. And I'm always happy to, answer questions. I know that, distribution is a foreign and big world and overwhelming world that and it's as we mentioned on before, is a process that a lot of people are unfamiliar with but necessary to their creative endeavors. So if it's not necessarily someone wanting to get into that side of things but wants to understand how the inner workings work, I'm happy to answer questions. So look me up on LinkedIn and yeah, reach out.
Well, I just want to thank you again. It's, as I mentioned in the beginning, a great opportunity for me to use this platform to connect with old friends or new people. And I think it is great for us to remind ourselves, like, we're all in a community or communities.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's people who are in the industry or people who want to get in the industry, the more we can, what are we doing? We're telling stories.
That's right.
And so giving people a time and a place where they get to tell a little bit more of their story and share some of the things that they've learned. So thank you so much for being here and being so open and talking about all those different things. And I can't wait to see what you make this year, because I think that's a great challenge for yourself. And I encourage everyone else to take on that challenge and say, what am I going to make in 2024?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. This has been a lot of fun. It's been nice catching up too, for sure.
As a reminder, this show comes out once a month in both a web series format that you can watch on YouTube. So if you're just listening to podcasts, please go to my YouTube channel, check that out. And it's an audio podcast on all the podcast platforms. So if you're watching this and you want to easily share it with someone, go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever and just share the link. Please like, follow, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support the show, please click on the link below. You can also contact me at my website if you have any questions about filmmaking or anything else. Off to the side, you'll see a couple of my books, Film Notes and the Film Notes Workbook. I encourage you to check those out if you'd like to learn more about filmmaking. See you in the next episode.
Scene one, Apple, take one.